Welcome to Global Solidarity, Accountability, Values for Wellbeing. This morning's session is part of the 27th Annual Conference of the International Environment Forum, IEF. IEF warmly thanks the conference co-sponsors for their support: the Wilmette Institute, the Baha'i International Community, and EBBF Ethical Business Building the Future. Today's session will have two main presenters, followed by 4 community project case studies presented by their respective representatives. After all the 6 presentations, we will have time for questions and answers. You're welcome to enter comments in the chat during the delivery of presentations. Additionally, if you wish to ask any questions, please type them in the chat in the Q&A box. The Global Solidarity Accountability Project was initiated by IEF President Arthur Dahl in December 2021. In this initiative, IEF joined its resources to EBBF to research and identify non-financial indicators that could be used as alternative to traditional GDP measures. GDP indicators focus solely on certain economic measurements translated in currency to measure how well countries are faring. However, this approach leaves out non-remunerated but important economic contributions to the well-being of the countries measured and ranked by GDP. The IEF-EBBF collaboration took project participants from multiple regions around the world on this journey. In the end, the project spurred several local communities to explore well-being at the grassroots. Our first speaker today is Arthur Dahl from Geneva, Switzerland. Arthur is president of IEF and a member of the EBBF Advisory Council. As a retired senior official of the United Nations Environmental Programme, he has extensive experience in the development of indicators of sustainability and values-based indicators. Arthur?
Thank you. Welcome all to our exploration of this challenging topic. I'll try to set a bit of the background for it, some of the other efforts that are being made in the same direction, and then describe a bit about our own project and where it came from, and where it may be going, and some of the results that have come from it as we go forward. So we hope it will stimulate you all to consider ways in which these kinds of ideas may also be relevant in your own communities. I'll start sharing my screen. I hope you can now see the screen sharing all right. So we know we're not going in the right direction. The latest planetary boundaries diagram that was just released last month shows that we've already overshot 6 of the 9 planetary boundaries identified by science as the safe operating space for humanity on this planet. And freshwater has been newly added to that as one that previously hadn't been considered so serious. Oceanification is very close to the boundary. We could easily go over that one as well in the near future. So we're still going in the wrong direction. And yet the science is clear. We know what to do. The means are available, and yet somehow we're still not, doing it. And it's because we have a lack of accountability in our global system. Implementation fails for lack of motivation. It's easier to look at other things. First of all, global environmental governance is voluntary. There's no, way in which you can actually enforce what has been agreed in the Sustainable Development Goals or in most of the other international agreements, and even in the Climate Change Convention, they have to get consensus of all the countries for what they decide. And so any one country can block, any kind of a strong idea of enforcement. There's a general failure of political will. And of course, within the framework of national sovereignty, which is the foundation of our present international system, national interests come before the common good of all. And so short-term political priorities, vested interests, corruption, which is an enormous problem in the world today, I think even more than defense expenditures, and retaining power come first. And so even the best efforts of some people and countries don't overcome the neglect of others. They're all the free riders who are ignoring the global common good. And this, then accountability is a way of trying to respond to these widespread failures in implementation and the lack of political will at the national and international levels. We have to, how in fact do we try to hold everybody account for their contribution to these problems? The UN Secretary General and many of the actors have called for measures to progress beyond GDP. And this will be an important theme for the public discourse in the next year of the UN debate, leading to the Summit of the Future in September of next year. So this is really a really important time to put these issues forward. Secretary General produced a policy brief last May on valuing what counts, framework to progress beyond GDP. And the report of the High-Level Advisory Board on Effective Multilateralism, a breakthrough for people and planet, also released last May, to which IEF members made significant inputs, calls for efforts to articulate and act on alternatives to GDP. So this is a widespread call. We need to say, how can we all try to respond better to it? Secretary General, when he reported to the General Assembly on the crises of 2023, listed the second one as, faced with poverty and hunger, we require rights to social and economic development. This is really a human right. Our economic and financial system is fundamentally wrong, requiring a radical transformation in our global financial architecture with priority to developing countries. And this has been a major call the last 2 or 3 days at the UN General Assembly high-level debate on the Sustainable Goals, where many countries called for rethinking our global financial system and architecture. Secretary General already in 2021, in his report, Our Common Agenda, said, now is the time to correct a glaring blind spot in how we measure economic prosperity and progress. Gross domestic product, GDP, fails to capture the human and environmental destruction of some business activities. And he calls for new measures to complement GDP. So what's missing in GDP? When you measure development in GDP, you're looking at monetary measures, how much money is flowing through the economy. You're looking at profit, return on investment, financial indicators. And of course, money from the economy can go up as much if you have lots of traffic accidents and things, and not necessarily any relationship to well-being. And they ignore ethics, values, morality, and spirituality. So a new system of accounting should be founded on a higher vision of human potential than simply selfishness and greed, which are the values that are encouraged by that materialistic system of measurement. The Baha'i International Community, in its beautiful statement last year, One Planet, One Habitation, had a whole section on rethinking economic arrangements, in which they said, putting the world on more ecologically sustainable foundations requires a recasting of the global economic order. People and the planet need to be valued as explicitly today as profit and economic gain have been in the past. Basic notions of progress, development, and prosperity will need to be recast in far more holistic terms. They said, if humanity's relationship with the natural world is to be refashioned, notions of progress, civilization, and development will need to be redefined. And they say efforts in this direction, such as budgets centering around well-being, which is what we've been trying to develop, or indicators of progress more holistic than gross domestic product, must be expanded and deepened, and fundamental questions are interrogated further. What are the qualities by which a person, a nation, or corporation are judged successful? For what are they commended and appreciated? Is it the wealthiest, or is it other values that are really more important? They continue, crafting a more holistic conception of progress will require an expanded understanding of ourselves as a species, including truths about the human spirit itself. The planet, its peoples and creatures have suffered tremendously from a materialistic mindset that views the individual as a purely self-interested economic unit, competing with others to accumulate an ever greater share of the world's material resources. This caricature has largely been rejected at the level of formal theory as simplistic and crude. Many aspects of the global order still rest on these assumptions, however, and often reinforce and deal with them. So these are foundational assumptions of our present society that need to be questioned. So looking at well-being indicators, there are already a number of international and national efforts to develop indicators of well-being beyond GDP. I'll share a few examples just to get started. The Club of Rome, which of course produced the famous study Limits to Growth back in 1972, produced 50 years later Earth for All, a survival guide for humanity. It includes Johan Rockström, who's a scientist we work with on the planetary boundaries. Sandra Dixon is a member of our Climate Governance Commission, the people we work with quite often now. And they rethink capitalism and move beyond GDP for a safe, secure, and prosperous future in the Anthropocene. They ask, are we measuring and valuing the right things? What really matters in economic policies is well-being. So a well-being economy serves people and the planet, rather than people and the planet serving the economy. They even create a well-being index as an alternative to GDP based on dignity, nature, connection, fairness, and participation. Dignity measured as worker disposable income, nature as climate change, connection as government services serving the common good, fairness is the ratio of owner income to worker income, participation is people's observed progress and labor participation. There's also a well-being economic alliance of leading change makers working together transform the economic system. They have the same core needs of human beings, dignity, nature, connection, fairness, and participation, but defined perhaps more broadly as dignity, everyone has enough to live in comfort, health, safety, and happiness. For nature, a restored and safe natural world for all life. For connection, a sense of belonging in institutions that serve the common good. For fairness, justice in all its dimensions is at the heart of the economic systems, and the gap between the richest and the poorest is greatly reduced. Participation, citizens are actively engaged in their communities and locally rooted economies. So these are the kind of the ideals we can aim for in another kind of system. There's even the well-being economy governments partnership with Scotland, New Zealand, Iceland, Wales, and Finland. And they try to employ qualitative and quantitative methods to find appropriate indicators for the well-being priorities, noting that often well-being priorities will be multidimensional or subjective. They support local data generation, community engagement, selection of indicators, making it clear that community members will be involved in monitoring and evaluation of policies. So it's not just top-down GDP, things communities can do for themselves. Identify intuitive indicators that can easily be understood by general audience. And they prioritize indicators that directly connect with the desired outcomes. So these are, again, some of the things we've tried to do in our own effort to go forward. Many people have heard about the Bhutan Gross National Happiness. Or to New Zealand, what we get is have brought indigenous perspective of well-being. Their diagram was actually the Maori value system they brought into their national statistics, with Maori values at the center. And so then their Vanuatu has simply done well-being in Vanuatu to rethink something beyond GDP based on community consultations all over the country. So our Global Solidarity Accounting Project was really, as we've already heard, based by IEF and EBBF, using relevant science-based non-financial units of account. And the approach aims to provide alternatives to the present economic paradigm and financial system where value, which monetary wealth, using direct measures of global solidarity. These accounts internalize what are now treated as environmental and social externalities. They could lead, for instance, to global taxes or fines on damaging activities, and also support payments for social contributions, environmental generation in the common interest. And they aim for human and natural well-being and sustainable development. We identified 9 indicator forms of capital. We could imagine many more, but we felt this was a reasonable number to start with, for both planetary environmental boundaries of the global commons and the minimum social economic standards for the common well-being of humanity. Looking at environmental accounts, such as carbon, biodiversity, pollution, basic needs accounts, eliminating poverty, social accounts, looking for the more social dimensions of employment and knowledge. And I'll go a little more detail describing each of these as I go forward. So for instance, on the environmental side, we all need energy to function. And that's, of course, where climate change is a major problem today for living things in society, for the economy. And that comes largely from the sun, with photosynthesis and fossil fuels. So carbon, which is involved in both of those, is a useful capital to measure. So we might say, how do we measure both the carbon accounts for release, we're extracting carbon from the ground, and sequestration, when, say, biodiversity captures solar energy and turns it into carbon compounds to feed all of us. Of course, biodiversity is another element of our ecosystem services, on which all life depends. We're causing the sixth mass extinction, global collapse of our food systems. And so we need to account for these. And so in order to halt the damage, reverse the harm done, restore a productive and sustainable Earth system. And there's already a lot being done in biodiversity accounting by the Diversity Convention and other scientists. So there's data out there that could do this. Of course, pollution and waste are another existential threat to our future. We've invented millions of new chemical compounds and plastics and so on, with no real thought to their environmental impact. Accounting for the major pollutants and wastes and their reduction and elimination would make it possible to hold originators of such formatives responsible for their impacts. And say, well, you caused the problem, you ought to help us to clean it up. On the individual elements of solidarity accounting, individual well-being, clearly eliminating poverty is essential. It's the heart of the Sustainable Development Goals. You have to make sure that every human being has shelter, clean water and sanitation, a source of energy, other basic needs met. And these can measure directly, not simply in how much each person earns per day, or $1.92, in financial measures. There are many other ways of doing it. Subsistence, lifestyles aren't measured by the economy directly. We need a set of food accounts, which will both include the capacity to produce the food that we need, and we also the distribution of food, that everybody has enough all the time for complete food security. Also the nutritional value of that food, so there are no health impacts from dietary insufficiency, like from fast foods. We also could look at the social dimension of food production, the important role of the farmer in society, ensuring that the food producers have an adequate income to live on, and not simply producing money for the people higher in the food chain. We need a set of health indicators to show how people are healthy all through their lifetimes, enjoying well-being, living a productive life, during society, reaching the end of life with a minimum suffering. And then there's the more social dimension of accounting, where we can look at work or service, far beyond paid employment, to include all forms of social contribution, including citizens' activities outside the economy, or childcare and homekeeping, and many other social services. The goal would be to ensure that everybody has a form of service throughout their lifetime in keeping with their abilities. We then need to account for the knowledge in all its forms, science, culture, art, information, all the other products of our intelligence. We can measure how well this is created, archived, accessed, used, and maintained for future generations. This includes education, through which this is transmitted and hopefully preserved and increased from generation to generation. And then finally, we have, you might say, the most basic level of any system is the rules and laws of which it operates, which are really, in human systems, the values that underlie the system and define its purpose. This includes a higher human spiritual purpose, both individually and collectively, with moral principles and rules to achieve our common social good. So accounting in this area would measure what constructive values are being adopted, how well they're being implemented in communities and societies around the world. So such global solidarity accountability gives a conceptual framework for human and environmental well-being with a number of functions. For an individual, it can help everybody to bring themselves to account each day, asking how they are living their responsibility to the whole human family, and what they can do to be of service while acquiring spiritual qualities. It can support communities in reading the local reality within the global context, and consulting on what might be the immediate local needs and possibility for social actions to meet those needs. It can provide the basis for government accountability and how well it is delivering its responsibility for the common good of all in its area of responsibility. For other institutions, including in the economy and business, it can underline the importance of every institution to consider how it is contributing in some way to human and environmental well-being as an essential purpose above and beyond profit. At the global level, it should become a tool for addressing inequalities within and between countries, highlighting progress towards justice and equity for all, including everybody, leaving no one behind. So this can contribute to the Beyond GDP discourse at the UN Summit of the Future next year. Then, of course, as we go to scaling down to community level, we see that conversations of global solidarity, sustainability really stimulate people. People can read the local reality, undertake social actions within this global context. And our project demonstrated the power of this Baha'i-inspired vision of the multiple dimensions of well-being to resonate with people, to inspire consultation about their local relevance. The concept needs to be simple enough to be understood by all, to appear logical and reasonable, to make sense. They should have the potential to be scientifically supported, but also to express an emotional connection, to reflect our higher spiritual purpose, both to refine our characters individually and to contribute to an ever-advancing civilization. They enable reading the local reality in new ways, identifying practical social actions to build stronger communities. So thinking of accountability in this way can provide a framework for many efforts to improve well-being, responding to local needs, priorities, and capacities. The case studies, the presentations that follow will illustrate what we have learned in some of the communities that have tried this out. So going forward, to conclude, where can we go from here? We can do more to develop tools for reading our local realities, the relevant values. We'll see some examples already in the case studies, but much more can be done to help people consult about these things. We can make the results available to encourage meaningful conversations, support public discourse about positive ways forward at a time when people are negative, depressed, and have lost hope. This is a positive way of looking at things. We can contribute to global efforts in the United Nations and elsewhere to replace the reliance on materialistic financial measures of development like GDP and to focus on human and environmental well-being. And the unique value added to this contribution will be the spiritual dimension that reflects the Baha'i vision and values of the society to emerge from the present chaos and confusion. So here are a few references that can be available for further information on the project, webinars that we've held on this. There's a basic working paper on the IEF website. There are video recordings of what we did versus Stockholm last year. And there's a whole section on beyond GDP examples far beyond what I shared with you here. So that is my presentation for today. Thank you for your patience in listening. Let me try to stop sharing. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur, for this comprehensive presentation of the project. At this time, we're inviting Laurent. Our second speaker is Dr. Laurent Mesbah from Sarajevo, Bosnia-Herzegovina. Laurent is a governing board member of IEF, an international consultant on sustainable development, and he teaches in various university programs. So, Laurent, please go ahead.
Thank you, Philip. So I'm going to present a little bit about the process of what's been happening since 2 years. Yeah, so it was initiated at the end, as it was said before, initiated at the end of 2021 by the IEF and EBBF. The Global Solidarity Accounting, Reflection and Action process involved a number of qualified and motivated people sharing online their experiences and reflections. So we had online working groups. We're looking at health, as it was said before, health, food, social, economic, and environmental indicators to measure progress. So the working group on environment is the result of a merging of previous working groups on carbon, biodiversity, pollution, accounting. Various online meetings took place with a number of online and public presentations. Much of the work done has been recorded and it's been available and published on the IEF and the EBBF websites. So why was it? It was also indicated before, looking at the carbon accounting is really important because the whole foundation of life on Earth is based on carbon. The first living organisms were able to capture the energy of the sun and storing carbon in the form of organic matter. Storing carbon also allowed for the creation of other living beings, those who need carbon to grow and those who are not able, the Those are able to capture energy of the sun and those who are not. And this is all well known in the carbon cycle, which involve living, but also non-living matter on planet Earth, which allows this carbon cycle to take place. So from the scientific perspective and from the material perspective, a lot of indicators are available. We are able to measure this very precisely. A lot of information is available. And on the other hand, living organisms form all this diversity of life. And we can also measure, we have a lot of information about diversity of life, about those being threatened, endangered, and also those, unfortunately, species who are already extinct. And these trends is a result of evolution, but also the impact of humans, the human impact on life on Earth can also be measured with all these different drivers that are positive and negative drivers, which are pushing or encouraging or disrupting existing various ecosystems we have on Earth. So we've been looking at all these indicators, but also this has been having an impact. One of the impact is pollution, and as I said, also pollution is another aspect that can be measured. So all these indicators allowed us, looking at this, with this working group, we came with this conclusion that accounting for carbon, biodiversity, pollution is supported with a rich variety of science-based indicators which provide us with the current trends and well documented on global platforms. And because it is a global issue, regulation at the global level is needed. We have these international conventions, such as the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We have the UN Convention on Biodiversity, and we have other conventions which allow us to measure at the global level, at the national level of the different trends. But unfortunately, with the current economic system, as it was indicated earlier by Arthur Dahl, the current economic system allows for growth, is actually pushing the planetary boundary, which have their own limits, and we have passed many of them, as it was indicated. So the result also at the global level, there's an increasing attention on the public on climate change, on biodiversity and pollution, especially among the youth. And the Baha'i international community, the International Environment Forum, the Ethical Business Building the Future, and the Wilmette Institute, the Global Governance Forum, among others of these Baha'i-inspired organizations, are contributing to the public discourse at the global level. So, but we also involve at the local level. And action at the local level, as will be later presented, and includes actions related to climate change, to pollution, to biodiversity, and to Earth's footprint, and to weights. And these examples are going to be presented very soon. So what are the lessons learned in the process? One lesson from the experience so far, illustrated on in our case study, is the power of Baha'i-inspired vision of the multiple dimensions of well-being to resonate with people and to inspire consultation about their local relevance. They enable reading the reality in new ways, identifying practical social actions to build stronger communities. Thinking of accountability in this way can provide a framework for many efforts to improve well-being, responding to local needs, priorities, and capacities. This again can be found on the IEF website. And going forward, we will continue to contribute to local and global efforts to human environmental well-being on the for the meaningful conversations, but also in action and contribution to the spiritual dimension. This presentation will be shown now, so thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Laurent, for your presentation of the process and the journey of the project. We will now have 4 presentations of case studies that grew out of this Global Solidarity Accountability Project. First, we will hear from Sarah de Hoff. She will present how she was inspired to develop the document Community Conversations for Global Solidarity, intended to stimulate consultation and collaboration among neighbors seeking the betterment of their community. This document inspired the 3 social action projects that will follow Sarah's presentation. Thank you, Sarah, for presenting your document.
Thank you. So, as Arthur and Laurent talked about, we were exploring these ways of measuring progress beyond GDP at the global level, and it became increasingly clear that while this global conversation is essential, there's a tremendous potential at the grassroots for taking action now. So how do we connect neighbors together? How do we help people rethink wealth as well-being? How do we inspire people to take action in stewarding this collective wealth? So we started developing discussion materials for neighborhoods and communities. We figured that if it was approachable, engaging, and generated hope, people would be attracted. So we took a cue from the Swedes, who turned a subway staircase into musical steps, and very quickly people abandoned the escalator for the fun of walking up the stairs. We represented each dimension of wealth as a symbol and just asked people to identify 3 qualities that would indicate the ideal state of that asset. For instance, what would food look like in a healthy, sustainable world? Perhaps it would be affordable, accessible, and healthy. Then we gave them a simple rating scale to assess the current state of each asset. We started off with a 1 to 10 scale and realized this was just too cumbersome. What does 3 mean? But this way, people can quickly identify which assets are doing well and which ones need attention. We started off with the 9 dimensions of well-being wealth that Arthur listed. And as we listened to people, we realized that there are other assets that are also important to folks. So we expanded the list and provided room for people to add their own. We also wanted to give people simple tools for working together on solutions. Consultation is a powerful way to understand what is actually happening, to examine an issue from all points of view, to make sure that all voices are heard, and to build consensus around collective action. It's based on the principles of the oneness of humanity, harmony and inspiration, inner work, and involves the process of expressing your view, letting it go, seeking truth, and then supporting the decision. Everyone, once a decision is made, everyone supports it so that the work can go forward. There's so much doom and gloom around climate change that people feel paralyzed. But if you help them reframe it and realize that they have wealth assets they can steward rather than resources that are being exploited, then they start to realize there is something they can do. And in doing so, we tap into the human spirit. We release our enormous potential to create, to collaborate, to envision, to transform our circumstances. Now we're starting to connect these neighborhoods across the globe to share ideas and inspiration and learn from one another. So these materials that we developed are free and ready to download at ourprosperousworld.com. They've been translated into French and German so far, and we're working on creating more resources. We've had some wonderful feedback from folks. One group in Austria shared, "The community inventory went unexpectedly smooth and immediately left us with a kind of surprise as to how few pluses were chosen. But it led immediately to the question, where do we want to start improving? And that triggered valuable action candidates. So these are the materials we've developed for the local conversations. Feel free to download them, share them with any community groups who might be interested. And now we'll go on to the case studies at the local level, and you'll hear some wonderful projects coming up.
Thank you, Sarah, for this presentation. The material has been really helpful to the project we will talk about now. We will have Nora Marion right now will present Ontario Social Action Project, which helped her community identify which issues were most important to its well-being. So Marion, please go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to share reflections on our community conversation initiative in Dufferin, Wellington, and Grey County, 2 rural counties in Ontario, southwestern Ontario. We were a small group representing 6 different rural communities, and you can see the circles there. We were all separated by about an hour's distance, and the red circle there represents me in Mount Forest. And although the prospect of starting community conversations was exciting, it was also challenging. And we started by engaging in intense consultation about what these conversations would look like, sound like, where we would have them, and how we would start in the public sphere. So our process began with testing tools that were provided by Sarah DeHoff, some questionnaires around human and environmental well-being. We worked with a number of versions of these questionnaires, them to be quite wordy, and thus an obstacle to consultation by all people. So we set out we used the questionnaires and created topic cards to frame each well-being issue. And this would allow people to select a topic. It reduced the words greatly. And then these bubbles were prompts to get the conversation started. These cards worked really well in both informal and formal settings, with whether it was 2 people or 62 people. We went on to pull more topics for community conversation, but ultimately we created the topic cards, but we ultimately found that anything to do with basic needs were really great starting points, because people had a frame of reference for basic needs. They know they need them to survive, and they consider them essential and a human right. We also considered how to create a safe public space that would encourage conversation and consultation, and we also looked at best ways to attract or invite people to these meetings. We strongly feel that some suggestions that we would pass on, that these meetings should take place in a common space, in the commons, where it's open and accessible to everybody, and there should be a time frame. These common spaces could be community centers or libraries. We also felt it was great to establish cross-sectoral and institutional supports, things like service clubs, civil servants, and community leaders. Ultimately, if you're going to take action, you need to be able to go to the right people to help you get that action started. We also felt that we would be well advised to have some facilitators for the event and to support the breakout groups for the consultation. They could manage time and capture the consultation in the small groups. And then they would also be the ones that could help with sharing each group's consultation when everybody came back to share their findings. After sharing the consultation, there could be some analysis and then a method of determining next steps and next action. We took our practice to our family, friends, home visits, reflection meetings in our communities and within our communities at large. We quickly discovered that food and shelter were already a big part of the public discourse as being major concerns. This is an example of a food topic card. We also actively looked for ways to get involved in initiatives that were already underway in our communities. One example was the Mount Forest Community Garden, which was addressing food insecurity, and saw that from the planning idea stage up to its creation. Then there was a call for citizen representatives on the municipal council to address affordable, attainable housing. And there was also a citizen-led think and do tank that we found in the northern part of Grey County, looking at social financing as ways to finance affordable housing. And basically the big issues were the lack of affordable housing for low to middle income families and growing homelessness. Potential ongoing actions are to continue to develop tools that can inform local action, become good at observing, listening, and participating, and being able to share the learning after reflection. Learn how to create a hopeful vision for the future through conversations that can lead to action in our communities. Connect local initiatives with global SDGs and national efforts to improve well-being for all. And connect well-being conversation to the concept of a triple bottom line: economic well-being, social well-being, environmental well-being. So that is our learning.
Thank you, Nola, for this presentation. At this time, we will have a presentation from Victoria Visser, who collaborated with Danielle Bianchi on a community project in Geneva that involves activities on the topic of well-being, which has enriched the life and strengthened the bonds in their community. So, Victoria.
Yes, hello. So Geneva, in the area where we created this very nascent project, is called Champel, which is a neighborhood in Geneva. Geneva is known as a relatively well-to-do town in a rather rich country, one of the richest in the world. So what does well-being mean to us? How does it, how do you define that? Where are the cracks in the system? And we wanted to try and start neighborhood discussions, and were invited to join a center in Champel who were starting just to think about this sort of discussions. And as a result of that, the doors opened literally so easily for us. They made available space free of charge, and they are very happy that we provide some sort of program. And our idea of providing a program has developed into short presentations in the evenings, usually, or if possible, 2 presenters, one from a more theoretical background and another with very hands-on experience, followed by an interactive discussion. That's the goal. And we have, let's see, let's have the next slide, please. So this is the 2 of us standing in front of the center. And the people who have decided to join us are local friends, but also the social workers. And there are several social centers in Geneva. The structure we adopted is very simple. There's no overriding body. There are no registration fees. We invite people to join when they can and if they can. And we try to emanate or distribute the idea and the notion of the joy of learning from each other, which is particularly enhanced when people from organizations come to speak to us as well. And the leitmotif in general is service to others. Let's have another slide, please. So the first, we run on a school year program with monthly meetings. And our first meeting for this year is going to happen next week on the 28th. And the topic is precarity in Geneva. And we're asking, we've asked ourselves where, who, and what does it mean in Geneva? And we have 2 people coming to talk to us about this, which leads me to also let you know that rather well-known local people have latched on to the initiative. For instance, next week we will see ex-television producer and founder of an association for the protection of early childhood, which I think was started off it started its activities in Albania, and in the meantime is also relevant in Geneva, together with a lady who runs an organization that is part of something called Partage, which means to share. And although this time it won't be about food, it'll be about clothing and school needs. We're keen to see to what kind of action these presentations will lead us, we hope. For the year, we're seeing we have a nice, very varied program. We are conjugating well-being and art. A musicologist is going to come to talk to us about how health and art and a community choir might be a good idea. She has started a small choir with members from 8 to 80 and beyond. There'll be an ecologist, ex-politician the following month who will be talking about spirituality and ecology, followed by a green economist who is going to tackle the idea of the happiness index to see where we can go with that. And so on. Where there's also an organic farmer and his micronutritionist wife who would like to come and present something around food and nourishment. So it's a very varied program that we're trying to tackle. And the last slide, please. Because it's still very nascent, there isn't a lot of, we can't share a lot of data with you at the moment. And if we found one thing, it is that well-being is clearly not just about material needs, and that, to quote something from the Baha'i writings, that material progress and spiritual progress are two very different things. And that only if material progress goes hand in hand with spirituality can any real progress come about. As Abdul Baha. And that concludes my presentation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Victoria, for your presentation. And now, last but not least, we will have a presentation by Jan de Jong, who has engaged members of his community in social dialogue on the topic of well-being. One of the participants started a well-being group in the apartment tower where she lives. And so now we will hear Jan present his case study.
Good morning, everybody. This is about the case in Eindhoven region in the south of the Netherlands. Is well-being as wealth. So why doesn't it go? Yeah, the story number 1 is about the establishment of the T-Tower group, as we call it. Suppose you live in a closed box like this big tower, living tower, an apartment tower, and basically there are no connection between the inhabitants. A friend of us who is a member of our study circle on well-being, I explain that later, lives in here. So you see her here shouting, help, how do I make connection? So how to make connection? Here's a story now how she achieved that, how to do that. So first he sent a message to all inhabitants and invited them to join a group to work on connection with the participants of the tower. That didn't work, no reactions. Secondly, she placed an information request on a bulletin board. That didn't work either. But then he realized, reading reality, that through the hall every day up to 300 people might pass coming in or going out. So there that worked because she started posting at the hall, spoke to people, invited them to join a group to work on connection within the tower. So finally she got a group of 5 people who became interested to join. So then she started up this group. This the lady in green is the initiative taker, and she became the president of this group. They named it the Together Tower. They appointed the secretary to make notes, and they used consultation, Baha'i consultation, as a means of communication between themselves. So the first thing they did was to make a values document, as explained by Nola. They didn't know how to do it, so they used the Virtues project with the cards of Linda Popov to select the values, how to deal with each other, and how to stand to other people. So then the first activities I did was to invite the participants of the inhabitants of the tower to come together on a meeting. So here is the meeting in the hall of the tower. Up to 50 people came, and you see them here chatting and eating some snacks with the broad and listening to the music and making contact. So the plans made by the working group now is to have twice a year to invite the tower inhabitants to join at International Neighbor Day and make art together. An example what you can do to make collective made art is here. This is made by the lady in green with the help of the hands of some of the Baha'is in Eindhoven. So we can get beautiful pictures out of that. So at present, to evaluate, you see her here, the lady in green, shouting, in the last few months, I've made more connections than in the last 16 years. So that's quite a nice indicator, I would say. So, oops, what's this? Well, this is the end of the story. Now comes story 2. Story 2 is about the Study Action Circle of Wellbeing as Wales Region Eindhoven. In fact, this is a study group I talked about earlier, which we set up at the end of 2022. At the end of the year, we studied the global solidarity accountability, and we decided to go local. I invited the Baha'is from the region Eindhoven. Finally, 8 wanted to join. We see our group here discussing topics at the apartment of the lady in green in the tower, the same tower we had before. We used the material of Sarah, which is very useful, and translated that in Dutch, including the introduction PowerPoint of NOLA, which you see here in Dutch, Welzijn as Rijkdom, and to introduce it to the people. And now each month we come together and discuss one of the topics of well-being, the wells with the Dutch cards we have. This is the back of the cards with questions for the facilitator to join in if the discussions holds, for example. So the future challenges is to maintain the momentum, to attract more people, and to build up a good relation with the municipality of Eindhoven and obtain a community center allocation. There are shops who are abandoned, so we're talking about now how to get one of these shops as a community center to do the activities from there. And then the fourth one is to inspire more people to start a neighborhood initiative. So this is the end of my story. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Jan, for your presentation. That was wonderful. So we've seen different initiatives in different countries, and all coming from the inspiration from Arthur's initiated project, and it offers much opportunities for other communities to engage in similar activities. I would like to thank all of the presenters, Arthur, Laurent, Sarah, Nola, Victoria, and Jan. And we will now switch to question and answers. So if you have questions, please enter them in the Q&A tab. And so we can continue our conversation with you. So one of the questions that was posed is about corruption and issues related to corruption. The question is, corruption is very complex and resilient. The process of moving from a high corruption to a low corruption society is long and non-linear. Even incremental improvements are difficult to sustain. Sad, but these are the truth affected, all from personal experience until business industry growth. So can we coordinate to update with government ruled now to manage the challenge of coping with corruption in terms of strategies in the region, disclosure of information, and integrity? The issue of corruption, I think, was addressed to Arthur, so I will maybe ask Arthur to join us at this point?
I think this is clearly one of the fundamental challenges of our world today, that in a society where there's no, might say, higher morality or higher values, where greed, drives everybody, corruption is the easiest way to fill your greedy desires, not even creating wealth honestly in any way possible, by extortion or whatever. So it was one of the illnesses of our society that has lost any sense of a higher purpose. So ultimately, might say in the long term, we're going to be increasing the level of morality and values and spirituality. We'll be able to rise up out of this quagmire. At the global level, there is already a discussion going on about the need for international anti-corruption court, because at the highest level, when you have a leader of a country, an autocratic leader who is corrupt, and his whole purpose is to amass wealth, and who dominates the courts and dominates the government system and so on, so there's no way within the country that you can challenge that corruption. The proposal is to create an international anti-corruption court that can, in the same way that the international criminal court could charge individuals for corruption when they cannot be addressed within their own country. So this is already under serious discussion at the global level. There, some governments are interested, so it may be initiative going forward to, at the highest level, already say, can we begin to address corruption globally? But below that level, the challenge is always that the corrupt are often in positions of power where it's not easy to challenge them, or they're linked with organized crime, so that it's dangerous to challenge them. They will simply eliminate you, and therefore, it's really only by building communities that have a sense of cohesion and solidarity, the kind of thing the Baha'i communities are doing to build community solidarity, that you create a new level of morality where you can build trust and understanding and sharing, rather than the selfishness of trying to grab whatever wealth is possible. So it's not an easy thing to answer, because it's become so fundamental to what's wrong in our society, how it's disintegrating in so many ways. But I think between the community approach of the Baha'i community and others who are trying to come together and be honest and bring values back into our community life, and the work at the global level to make it more visible and to try to get some of those who are the worst examples at the level of heads of government. Those are two dimensions that try to address corruption, but it's not going to be easy to solve, and we just have to do the best we can and protect people who are being subject to corruption wherever we can, show some solidarity with them, if it's possible, through transparency to explain, and where there is enough rule of law to try to address it, use those tools when it's possible. But it's not a perfect answer. There's no perfect answer to a question like that at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Arthur. Another question is whether the slide decks and infographics can be shared. They will be shared. They will be available on the IEF website. But if you want specific slides, you may want to give your email address in the chat, or contact IEF at iefworld.org, and you'll find the resources. Another question is for Sarah, is with your experience in East Asia, are you considering expanding our Prosperous World project into East Asian languages?
So this has been a collaborative effort, and I'm happy to work with anyone who wants to translate these materials into their language. The translations that we have already produced have been people volunteering to say, I want to do this in German, or I want to do this in French. So I'm happy to work with anybody who wants to translate these things.
Thank you, Sarah. So at this time, we don't have other questions. So maybe one of the question is, one of the questions I would like to ask, and maybe the community the community in attendance can answer it in their own ways. How do you feel humanity can better consultation to solve its well-being. So a lot of what we learned today, including what Sarah presented, is having tools so that we can have a meaningful conversation among ourselves at the community level, and of course that also can be elevated at the institutional level in our communities, whether it is at the municipality or the state or the province and so forth. So are there any suggestions or any thoughts about engaging in developing more consultative, positive consultative processes that will benefit the communities we live in?
I think perhaps in Nishma, already we've seen in each of the case studies, the first step was to launch a consultative process in the community using whatever approach seemed to fit locally, whether it be in an apartment building trying to get people together, whether it be in a community center inviting people to come and discuss subjects that would be of interest. So we've already seen some examples. So it depends very much on the culture, the way the community is structured, where there may be possibilities open to, with a bit of courage, to invite people to join in a consultative process. And I think one thing we've shown in this project is that when you put well-being as the question to be discussed, it resonates with people. It's something they want to discuss. So they feel something they want to feel lacking in some way or another. So it's proven to be a very fruitful way to begin a consultative process within whichever kind of consultative process might be possible in the particular framework.
Thank you, Arthur. I think this is the key: is that we cannot wait for others to start it. We are our own protagonists. We've got to engage and take the bull by the horns and engage others in our communities. Another question that was raised was to an action that would be to teach the children from the very earliest ages, and it was talking about the butterfly effect. I think that an example of that is quite visible in the Baha'i community worldwide. There are programs of education starting with children from a young age and moving on to the 11 to 15-year-olds, developing their skills of identifying their personalities, finding out who they are, how they can contribute, and then become protagonists in the community, become engaged in serving their communities and making service the drive of their outlook on society and on their communities.
Can I just add one thing?
Sure. Yes.
I noticed that in my example and Victoria's example, engaging with those agencies, like basically your essential workers, your frontline workers that are dealing with the most at-risk populations, those people are ready, willing, and able to move, and are the ones moving in spite of any kind of institutional resistance. And for example, there was a city here during COVID where 200 people died, homeless people died on the streets because they froze to death. And the frontline workers did a sit-in and a hunger strike at the municipal hall. And that has led to enormous change, bringing all the stakeholders to the table and a complete bringing lots of local, provincial, and federal money into a strategy that was developed in collaboration with all the stakeholders, even the homeless people. So that is a really great, and we notice here, like in our example too, it's the frontline workers, it's the family health teams. Those are the ones that you can really engage with. They're ready, willing, and able to move. And I think a good question to add to everything is, who is deserving of well-being? And just let that hang for a bit. and let people kind of consult around that. So that's my last word.
All right, there's another question for Arthur or Nola. Have you come across the work of Ron Coleman in Nova Scotia or Mark Anielewski in Alberta on genuine progress indicators? Ron came to New Zealand circa 2008 and discussed well-being indicators with government and NGO reps, and may have had a role on OECD or UNECE work around that time. So I don't know if Arthur has an answer to that, or Nola, if you know.
I do. I know Arthur may have one as well, but I know Mark. I don't know Mark Anielewski, but I've connected with him. I've read his books, and we've been in a dialogue because he just seems to be on the same wavelength here. And he was very much involved with the Bhutan Happiness Indicator, and he still is very much involved with developing surveys to provide information to anybody who's wanting to know what their, whether it's a community or a company or any a country or a province, what the people feel about how their well-being is. He's very much involved with the First Nations here in Canada, and is doing a lot of good work. So we've been in dialogue a little bit, and he's very much a leader of thought on this well-being issue, and still continues to present. And I stay abreast of what he's doing.
Thank you, Nola.
Yes, I also want to ask a question to John, and a question related to the case study that you have presented, and really to know like what motivated you to work on this topics related to well-being as wealth, and what were some of the key elements that you have experienced that have brought the group together and has advanced to other levels of discussion.
Yeah, how did it start? Well, as I told you, I was a member of the international group on GSA. So, and then it was all, let's say, theoretically about the whole world. It was a nice process and we learned a lot. But then at the end, we said, yeah, what to do now? So we came to the conclusion with the whole group, let's go local and see how we can discuss things local. And then Sarah came with this wonderful material and Nola. And I said, well, I cannot, if I want to do something, I have to start somewhere. So that's why I started sending emails to the buyers, and in the 90 days feast, I asked about if they would like to join, and finally they came together. And I thought maybe one card to discuss one afternoon, I present the whole process. So I did that, but they all wanted to continue to go through these cards. And already after the first time, when we discussed the card of social coherence and culture, we came to the conclusion that the main deficit in the Western society is that there is no connection between the people. Even in this apartment tower, people who own the apartments looking down on people who rent the apartments, for example. So we thought there's a lot of work to do there. And one of our participants, the lady in green, she started right away with inviting this group, the process I told you before. And you see that some people are really interested, and they met people who are really acting already as a kind of social worker. So she learns from her how to approach people. So it's interactive process as well. So it's very nice to see. Thank you.
Another question we have is about the intergenerational engagement. All the people connected to this IEF session are experienced and youthful in spirit. How are young people engaging in this work, since they will inherit the greatest impact of a heating world, biodiversity extinction, etc.?
Mm-hmm.
Anyone would like to address this question?
I think, the IEF has been trying to develop a youth group within IEF, and there's some amazing youth who are involved. Some of those of you who may have followed the first part of this conference, the first presentation on the 16th, it involved some of those youth. But we've also found that youth have so heavily committed in their studies, in their schoolwork and so on. It's hard for them to put a lot of time in something like this. It just doesn't fit so well with the pressures of student life, whether you high school or college. So that getting something that develops some momentum is more difficult among that age group. I mean, they see the need for it. They're very much interested in it, but it's not easy for them to take something and run with it, over time, which is why it's often those of us who are older who have more time to devote to it and can keep after it, as you go forward. I would also add to that, because there's also in the chat proposal by Robert Rogers about keeping everything positive in these approaches, and I think that's where reaching out to young people is particularly important, because when you look at the studies about eco-anxiety or climate anxiety, and you see that a great majority of young people are afraid of the future, or don't want to have children, see only the bad side of things. And the psychologists who study this said that the best antidote to that is to give them some positive thing to work on, to do, even if it's at a small scale, that it helps to overcome the purely negative side of the news in which young people are drowned in today. So the more that we can, and I think one of the advantages of this accountability approach is that it focuses on measuring the positive. How can you measure your improvements in biodiversity? How can you measure the elimination of poverty and raising people out of so by focusing on well-being as something positive you want to encourage, and you're already creating a different framework for thinking about the problems around you, and ways in which the positive can be increased rather than somehow fighting the negative and opposing all the bad things in society. So I think that also will help, to reach out to young people and share with them things that are relevant to their immediate concerns as we go forward. Thank you.
Okay, in the comments.
Yeah, I have one more comment where it comes to
Sure, yes.
young children. We had one presentation by a young mother of a couple of children who organizes in her home, together with her husband, classes, children's classes, and these classes revolve around learning, amongst others, values, and they produce art around these values. And she came to present that, and it was really quite moving and interesting to see and to hear how young, very young children, I'm talking 3, 4, 5, up to 6 years old, can engage with all sorts of notions that are not treated in school. They're very aware and very astute to what happens. And it was interesting also to see what the reactions from the few people who were there at the time were with respect to this mother, because people think it's not really children's material necessarily from the outside. And the mother clearly said, no, I benefit a lot in my youth from this type of dynamic. So I think that for the very young ones, it's easier to engage, and it might influence how they develop through the end of primary school, secondary school, and even some of their studies.
That builds on what Winona Merritt said in her chat before she had to leave us, about the importance of taking this kind of systems thinking, that integrating to young people, to children, and that they need to be learning this other way of thinking about things that integrates everything together, sees it as a whole, and and looking at the butterfly effect, where some very small effect here can gradually multiply and affect a much larger system. So we can do more to try to develop the tools and the approaches to share these ideas that we've developed, you might say, for adults at the well-being level, but also can be taken down to what could go into children's classes and children's activities and practical things they can do to grow a garden, to plant things, to watch them grow, to understand how everything relates to everything else, and to get the tools they need as they grow up to continue to look at the well-being side of things. Thank you.
I would like to concur. I think you'll see the intergenerational piece fall into place with the action, as I think Victoria and Arthur explained, and as I saw with when the community gardens unfolded and when people came. And that was just an amazing experience. That was where all ages were there working together, serving together, helping each other. It was an amazing thing to witness. And I think any of these kind of actions that are high-minded and meant to, bring betterment to a community will naturally bring the intergenerational. I've seen it a couple times in a couple of different things. And somebody had asked about the justice part of it. I think that's what the question was. It's being open and transparent and sharing those values up front, and keeping it, as Victoria shared. And I think the same thing with all the case studies. Everything was open and accessible and free to all. And I think, and then just keep making sure that our shared prosperity is everybody's, to everybody's benefit. And I think people get that when they come together, and they feel it. They'll feel it if your hearts are true and pure in what you're doing. I don't think it's any more complicated than that.
The question is, I live in a culture of war-torn USA. How can you talk about this stuff without sounding like the Antichrist, one world government with its centralized control and regulations, and thus without triggering the Bible-based fears of apocalyptic angst? I think that generally we have to remember that we all have divergent views about the world and the conditions we live in and what the solutions are. But the process we distilled out of our project was that consultative process, the coming together of recognizing each other as human beings with each other's personal views, and then finding common ground and build from that common ground, build a better society, a better community, is key to the progress of humanity. And the case studies kind of indicate that there are different levels of development, but I think that Nola's project was has been the most advanced and the most engaged in bringing solutions. But it is obviously in the core of the human being is to survive and to live in harmony with others, because that is part of our survival. So I think the spiritual values have to be explored so we can find common ground to build a better society, to find solutions to our problems, because you cannot just count on GDP measurements to evaluate the progress of the world as we can see today. Any other thoughts can be shared at this point?
Well, I think this last question about not sounding like the Antichrist, one world government, fears of apocalypse. I think when you're talking with people are always locked within, might say the propaganda, the ideology that they've been sold, and it's hard for them to look beyond that. But you can even there look at the the language within their own sources. The Garden of Eden and the responsibility for caring for the Garden of Eden, and how what went wrong there was the selfishness of wanting to eat the apple, the forbidden apple, that not respecting God's wish. But so I think that even within that framework, one can point out other biblical sources that say the reverse, that may say, well, maybe there's another way of looking at it, with even within your own source of authority, about our need to be responsible for the well-being of the whole garden, and as part of our taking this forward. So it's not easy in a polarized situation in America to find an argument that works. But I think the more we look at the positive side of things, and the more we can show that well-being has multiple dimensions, and that can attract those who are willing at least to start building something new, as opposed to simply drowning in what's going wrong at the moment. Thank you.
I think too, as Nola mentioned, that action is kind of what brings us together, and action can be very small and very simple. I mean, it could be as simple as going for a walk with somebody and noticing the biodiversity, you know, identifying the native plants in the area. And that starts a conversation. Well, how do we build that? How do we sustain that? How do we steward that biodiversity? What can I do? Can I plant some native plants in my yard? And finding, as Philippe said, finding that common ground. And it can be really far away from that political conversation or that apocalyptic conversation, down to the seeds themselves. You know, we can bring it down to the plants around us.
Well, time is running out. We have about just a few minutes left. So at this time, I would like to thank our co-sponsors, the Wilmette Institute, the Baha'i International Community, and EBBF for their support and encouragement over the time that this project developed. And also to our speakers, Arthur, Laurent, Sarah, Nola, and Victoria and Jan. I think it has been a rich conversation. We've all benefited from it. The recording of this presentation will be on iefworld.org in a few days, probably, so you can revisit it. Anyone who has specific questions about where to get resources, I think the resources will be listed on the iefworld.org website anyway, but you can reach out to us on that question. Thank you again for your participation, and we wish you a good end of the day for Europe, beginning of the day for United States, and middle of the night for Asia Pacific.